Just like we did in our edit user or update user component, we're going to show a success or an error message when a user is created or when a user is deleted. Now, the interesting part about this is that since we're redirecting a user back to the user's page, they're not going to be able to see that success or error message in that specific component. For instance, if we go into create user, we're going to redirect them away from the create user component, and this is where we would normally show our success message, but really we need to show it over here. Let's go take a look at our component hierarchy in the app routing. And let's see where we have to have components talk to each other. Right now we're in user create component. We need to go up one into our parent users component, and this is where we will display the error or success message. Let's go into users component HTML, and right above here we'll say this is where messages go. All right. Now let's talk about how components can interact with each other. In the Angular2 Getting Started course, we had an input and an output. Now what that means is that each of these components were able to emit an event, and then a parent component was allowed to listen to that event using event binding. Now to demonstrate, we could do something like this: create user component, and then outside of that, user was created is the event, and then we could listen to that. We could say on user created, and we'd handle that in our parent component using the on user created event method, and we'll close that. Now this is what a normal component communication would look like between parent and child component. If we wanted to go from parent to the child, we could use property binding and say something and then bind it here is some message. The interesting part about our application here, though, is that we're using a router outlet. And since we're using router outlet, all of these components get injected, and we don't really have access to these output or input methods here. To handle this, let's go take a look at the Angular docs. We're going to go to angular.io/docs, and this is the docs home. Over in the side here under cookbook, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, component interaction. Let's take a look here. This is how we're going to get information from different components, and we can do from parent to child with input, which is that input binding we were talking about. There's a couple more options, and we have a child event that we listen for, which is the output. We can use viewChild, which goes and grabs a variable, but the one we want to look at here is parent-child communication via a service. What we're going to do here is we're going to take observables a step further. So far, we've just been using the HTTP library to give us an observable back, and then we subscribe to that observable, and we get whatever information comes out of that observable. Now, RxJS, or reactivex.io, they provide observables to us. They also provide something called a subject, and that's what this is right here. Now, a subject is both an observable and an observer. This is a way we can send events between different components. Now, a subject is what we're going to use, so let's go ahead and start bringing that into our application. Under user service, this is where we're going to have our data streams coming out of. Now, I've seen this done in different services. We could say a user information service, and that would be solely responsible for sending out information like this. I've seen an event emitter service, which is just a generic event emitter service where any component can call it and emit events, and any other component in our app can listen to that. But here we'll create it all in this user service since it's only going to deal with everything about users. We're going to do two things. We need the observable source. We also need the observable stream. Now the source is going to be the thing that holds the data, and the stream is going to be the thing that we subscribe to. which is the observable. Here, private user created source is equal to new subject, and inside of that subject we'll have a user, and that will be that. We'll also have a private user deleted source is equal to new subject, and that will have a user. Now the reason we're passing in user is that we can go into this overall users component and maybe say Chris was deleted, and that way we would have that user's name. Let's go back. We don't have subject yet. We'll import that. RxJS subject. Now that we have our data source, and this is where we're going to add new information to it, we need the stream that we'll be able to get subscribed to from other components. We'll say user created stream is equal to this.userCreated source as observable, and we're passing that back as an observable. Now one thing I'd like to change here, and this is kind of a soft convention used around the web right now, is instead of saying stream every single time, we'll just put a $sign here. And that denotes this is going to be a stream that we can subscribe to get information from. We'll also have user deleted stream is equal to deleted source as observable. Okay, so now we have our streams and we have our sources. So down here under create user, this is where we would go ahead and grab that source and pass it some information that a user has just been created. After we map this information, we're going to add a new line and we'll say .do user, this.user created, and we'll pass in a user. Now we're showing two errors here. Do, we need that do operator, open up at module. All right, that one's fixed. And the next, we need to create this user created. We'll go down here. We'll say private, the user was created, add this info to our stream. We'll create our method here, user created. We're passing in a user, which is of type user, and this.user created source .next, and this is a method for how we can pass information into this subject, and we're passing in the user. This way, by passing in next, our observable will get another piece of data that we can pass around. Let's go ahead and create user deleted as well. The user was deleted. Add this info to our stream. Now on this delete user method earlier, we just have the ID, so we can't really pass in a user here. We'll say this.user deleted source .next. And now we're just saying this user deleted was called. Let's go up here and fix this since we're not really passing in a user. Now, when we create a user and this method on this user service is called, we're going to map this data, and we're also going to do a user created. We could actually clean this up a little bit further and just do that. Let's go down here and we'll do the same for delete user .do response. Since we didn't really have a user coming out of here, this.user deleted. Now down here, what I'd like to do is console log user has been created, and here all right, now we're able to console log when each of these methods is called, which is called on delete user and create user up here. All right, let's give that a shot. As soon as we create a user, we'll go create user, write out some information, open up the console. We'll go create user, we get redirected, user has been created, and user was created. So we have two console logs here to tell us that information is going to happen. We can go ahead and delete this, and where's the other one? Up here. Delete those. Now we have this service that has access to these observables. And these observables can give us data over time, which is what observables do. And the data over time that we're going to have is information about whether a user was created or a user has been deleted. This information isn't going to be any good to us unless we take that observable and subscribe to it in another component. Let's go over to our users component, .ts file, and let's bring in the user service here. And in the constructor, we'll go ahead and add that. Now, ng on init, this is where we're going to go ahead and subscribe to both of those observables. This .service .user created, and we're going to subscribe to the stream .subscribe, and we're going to get a user, and let's break that out. This .success message. We'll use the same technique we used over in the update component. And let's make that a little more personalized. We'll use a template string here. User.name has been created, and we'll close that out there. We need success message. We also need to subscribe to user deleted stream. And let's comment these out. User has been deleted or created. And the same for user has been deleted. We'll say the user has been deleted. Since this doesn't really pass in any information, we'll just call this data. We could also just leave that as a blank there. We also need error message, which we won't really use for this course, but it's good to keep it in mind. And we'll call those both strings. Now let's give this a shot. We'll go to create a user, type in some information. Actually, let's do a real one this time. Chris and username. We'll create user. User was created, and we don't really get our message here. And that's because we didn't actually use success or error message inside of our template. Let's go fix that. Users component. This is where the messages go. We'll do div and gif, just like we did in the other component, success message, class alert, alert success. Copy that. Error, and this is actually danger. Let's try that out now. We'll go to create a user, Chris, username, and create a user. Chris has been created. Now we have information getting sent from our child component to our parent component, thanks to our user service and the subject, which is basically a data stream, an observable, and an observer at the same time. Now this message doesn't go away once we start navigating through. Let's go ahead and really quickly just clean that up inside of users component. We'll call close success message. Actually, let's call that close messages, or clear messages is a little bit more verbose. And we'll say this dot success message is equal to blank, and this dot error message is also equal to blank. Let's put those in a timeout so that we can kind of let them disappear after, let's say, 5 seconds. And now we have to call that inside of each of these. This dot clear messages. Doc block, just for clarity, clear all messages after 5 seconds. All right, let's give that a shot. Create a user. And our message gets disappeared. We did a lot in this lesson, and this concept is really, really important to Angular 2. This is the way we're going to get data from any component in our application, up to parent components, up down to children components, or over to sibling components. This is going to do it for our users section. Let's move forward and start to do a login section and a little bit of the authentication concepts that will be used in Angular 2. This won't be a full authentication system since we're just using a fake API, but this is really important to know when we start to build our own apps and start to use HTTP to pass around JSON Web Tokens and do auth that way.